One day they couldn't go a moment without hearing your voice. Now their silence is louder than any words they ever spoke. You replay the moments, searching for clues, wondering what shifted. But here's the truth. When someone who once held you close suddenly turns away, it's not just about you. It's about them. Their battles, their fears, their inability to face what they feel. And maybe, just maybe, it's about something greater, a lesson wrapped in pain, urging you to stop chasing shadows and start embracing your own light. Because love, real love, does not vanish overnight. It does not waver in silence. It does not require you to beg for presence. So when their absence shakes you, let it. Let it break the illusions, not your spirit. Let it remind you you are whole even when they are gone. Because the moment you stop seeking their validation is the moment you start reclaiming your power. When someone who once held you close begins to pull away, the silence they leave behind feels deafening. It's not just the absence of their words, it's the absence of their presence, their warmth, their connection. You find yourself searching for answers, analyzing every interaction, replaying moments, trying to decode the reasons behind their sudden withdrawal. But here's the truth. Silence is never empty. It carries weight, it carries meaning, and often it speaks louder than any words ever could. When someone stops speaking to you, it doesn't mean they've stopped feeling. Silence isn't a void, it's a voice. A voice that whispers their fears, their uncertainties, their struggles. A voice that reveals what their words cannot express. Perhaps they are grappling with emotions they don't yet understand. Perhaps they're retreating into themselves to process something deeper. Or perhaps they're testing the waters to see how you respond in their absence. Whatever the reason, their silence holds a message. And the key is not to react impulsively, but to step back and truly listen. Not with your ears, but with your intuition, your understanding, your heart. The natural instinct when faced with silence is to fill it, to reach out, to demand answers, to seek closure. But sometimes the most powerful response is to resist that urge. Instead of chasing after their words, allow the silence to exist. Sit with it. Embrace the discomfort it brings, because in that discomfort lies the truth, not just about them, but about yourself. Silence forces introspection. It makes you confront the parts of you that long for validation, that fear rejection, that crave reassurance. It shines a light on your insecurities, your anxieties, your unspoken fears. And while it may feel agonizing in the moment, it is also an opportunity for growth. To understand why their silence affects you so deeply. To recognize that their withdrawal is not a reflection of your worth, but a reflection of their own internal battles. When someone you care about withdraws, it's easy to internalize their actions, to assume that you've done something wrong, that you've failed in some way. But the reality is, their silence is often more about them than it is about you. It's about their fears, their uncertainties, their struggles. Maybe they're afraid of vulnerability. Maybe they're overwhelmed by the depth of their feelings. Maybe they're dealing with something entirely unrelated to you. Whatever the case, their silence is their story, not yours. And this is where your power lies, in recognizing that you are not defined by their actions, in understanding that their withdrawal does not diminish your value. You are still whole, still worthy, still deserving of love and respect. The silence may feel like rejection, but it is not the end of your story. It is simply a chapter that challenges you to grow, to reflect, to strengthen your sense of self. But what happens next is up to you. You can choose to chase after them, to demand answers, to seek closure, or you can choose to hold your ground, to respect their need for space, to focus on your own growth. The choice is yours. But remember this, true connection cannot be forced. If their feelings are genuine, if their love is real, they will return, not because you begged, but because they realize your value in your absence. Silence can be painful, but it can also be transformative. It teaches you patience, resilience, self-reliance. It reminds you that your worth is not dependent on someone else's presence. It challenges you to find strength in solitude, to embrace the stillness, to trust in the timing of your life. And when you do, you'll find that the silence no longer has power over you. So the next time someone you love withdraws, don't fear the silence. Embrace it, let it teach you, let it reveal the truths you've been avoiding. And most importantly, let it remind you of your own strength, your own worth, your own ability to thrive, no matter who chooses to stay or leave. Because silence, as loud as it may seem, is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a deeper understanding, a stronger connection, a greater love, starting with the love you have for yourself. And that is the ultimate power, to stand firm in the face of silence, knowing that your worth is unwavering, your value unshaken, your story still unfolding. When someone who once adored you suddenly pulls away, it can feel like an earthquake, shaking the foundation of everything you believed about your connection. The warmth of their attention, the comfort of their presence, the certainty of their love, now replaced with cold distance, unanswered texts, and a silence that speaks in riddles. And in that moment, the mind becomes a battlefield. You search for reasons, you wonder what changed, you question if you did something wrong, if you should have done something differently. But here's the reality. When someone begins to ignore you, it's often not about what you did, it's about what they feel. And sometimes people pull away not because they don't care, but because they care more than they know how to handle. Love is not always a smooth road. It's raw, unpredictable, and often terrifying. Deep emotions can be overwhelming, even for the strongest among us. Some people retreat not because they've stopped loving, but because love itself has confronted them with parts of themselves they weren't ready to face. Maybe they see their own fears, insecurities, and vulnerabilities reflected back at them in the depth of your connection. Maybe they're afraid of losing themselves, of getting hurt, of repeating the wounds of their past. Maybe they are simply unsure if they're ready for the intensity of what they feel. Whatever the reason, their withdrawal is not always a statement about your worth. It's a mirror to their internal struggle. And yet, when faced with this kind of distance, most people do the opposite of what's needed. They chase, they try to fix, they overanalyze and overcompensate, hoping to reignite a fading spark. But love, real love, is not sustained by force. It is not won by pleading or convinced by desperation. The more you push, the further they retreat. Because what they need is not pressure, it's space. Space to understand themselves. Space to recognize what you bring into their life. Space to confront their own emotions without interference. But here's where it gets complicated. Because giving space is not about playing games or pretending you don't care. It's not about withdrawing your love out of spite or using silence as a weapon. True space is given from a place of self-respect, of understanding, of quiet strength. It's saying, I see you, I honor where you are, but I will not lose myself in the process of waiting for you to find yourself. It's trusting that if the connection is real, if the love is true, distance will not destroy it. It will reveal its depth. People don't value what is constantly available. They don't recognize the importance of something until they feel the weight of its absence. When you step back, you allow them to feel the difference between a life with you and a life without you. And that realization, that contrast, can be more powerful than any words you could ever say. It is in your absence that they will come to understand your presence. It is in your silence that they will hear the echoes of what they once took for granted. But the real magic of giving space isn't just about them. It's about you. Because when you stop focusing on why they pulled away, you start focusing on what this moment is teaching you. You learn the strength of your own boundaries. You discover the resilience of your heart. You realize that love is not about holding on with clenched fists, but about standing firm in the knowledge that you are enough, whether they come back or not. So, if someone you love suddenly starts ignoring you, don't let their actions define your worth. Don't let their confusion become your suffering. Instead, take a breath, step back, allow them the space to figure out what they truly want. And while they do, focus on yourself. Pour into your own life, your own growth, your own happiness. Because when love is real, distance won't break it, it will strengthen it. And if they truly belong in your life, they will find their way back, not because you chased them, but because they realized what they had when they had you. And if they don't, then you'll have already built the strength to walk forward, knowing that the love meant for you will never require you to beg for it. When someone who once held you close suddenly begins to drift away, it's tempting to feel as though the connection you shared is slipping through your fingers. It's easy to spiral into self-doubt, wondering if you weren't enough, if you did something wrong, or if you missed the signs of their retreat. But here's an undeniable truth. Distance often becomes the litmus test of love. It's not just the absence of proximity, it's the presence of choice. And it's in this space of separation where the heart finds clarity, where emotions are stripped of distractions, and where people confront the truth of what someone truly means to them. You see, love is not just about what we feel when someone is by our side. It's about what we experience when they're no longer there. It's in the quiet moments, when their laughter no longer fills the room, their voice no longer soothes your day, and their presence is no longer your constant companion, that we understand the depth of what we may have taken for granted. Distance has a way of amplifying emotions, of making the heart speak louder than it ever does in the noise of everyday life. But what makes this process so profound is that it's rarely one-sided. When someone pulls away, they too are stepping into that same silence, into that same space of reflection. And while they may have chosen to withdraw, it doesn't mean they're immune to the weight of absence. In fact, for many, the realization of what they've lost doesn't occur until they're left alone with their thoughts, until they wake up one day and feel the hollowness of a life without you, until they recognize that the void they tried to create isn't just empty, it's filled with echoes of everything they walked away from. This is why giving someone space isn't just an act of respect for them, it's an act of respect for yourself. It's a declaration that you are not here to chase, to convince, or to prove your worth. Instead, you stand firm in your value, trusting that if your presence truly mattered, it will be felt, even in your absence. And the beauty of this approach is that it allows the other person to come to their own realizations, free from pressure, free from coercion. Because love, real love, is never about forcing someone to stay. It's about giving them the freedom to choose. But here's the key. Distance isn't always about drawing someone back. Sometimes it's about revealing the truth of a connection that was never as strong as it seemed. And that's okay. Because in that truth, you gain clarity. You stop holding on to illusions. You stop clinging to a relationship that was only surviving out of habit or convenience. Instead, you open yourself up to the possibility of something real, something enduring, something that doesn't require you to constantly fight for its existence. The process is never easy. It takes immense strength to step back, to resist the urge to reach out, to sit with the uncertainty of whether they'll return or not. But it's in this restraint that you find your own power. You learn that your happiness, your worth, and your peace do not depend on someone else's choices. You learn to build a life that is rich and fulfilling on its own, so that when love does return, if it returns, it is an addition to your life, not the foundation of it. And when they do come back, and many times they will, it's not because you chased them. It's not because you begged for their attention. It's because they chose you freely and fully from a place of understanding and appreciation. They've felt the absence. They've reflected on what you bring into their life. And they've made the conscious decision to return. And that choice, when it comes from a place of clarity, is far more meaningful than anything that could have been forced. So if someone you love deeply has chosen distance, let them have it. Let them experience the truth of what life feels like without you. And while they do, focus on yourself. grow, heal, become the person who doesn't just wait for love, but thrives in its absence. Because the kind of love you deserve is the kind that chooses you, not out of convenience, but out of conviction. And if they don't return, then you'll know that their place in your life wasn't meant to be permanent. You'll know that their silence was a gift, giving you the opportunity to find the kind of love that doesn't waver, doesn't retreat, and doesn't leave you questioning your worth. Always remember, love that is meant for you will never require you to lose yourself to keep it. Let that truth guide you, and you'll never settle for less than what your heart truly deserves. When someone who once held you close begins to withdraw, it can feel like an unraveling, a slow, silent breaking of something you believed was unshakable. There is a deep kind of ache that comes with watching a connection fade, a pain that lingers in the unanswered messages, the changed routines, the spaces they used to fill but now leave empty. And in that moment, when the person you love starts ignoring you, your instinct may be to chase, to demand answers, to try to stitch the unraveling thread back together. But what if the real power lies not in pursuit, but in patience? The thing about love, about human connection, is that it is often tested in the space between presence and absence. When someone pulls away, they are not just creating distance, they are stepping into a place of reflection, whether they realize it or not. And in that reflection, they begin to confront the reality of what you mean to them. It is easy to take someone for granted when they are always there, always available, always ready to give. But when that certainty disappears, when the warmth they once leaned on turns into an unfamiliar cold, something shifts within them. They begin to realize the depth of your presence only in its absence. This is why restraint is powerful. Because when you give someone the space to miss you, you are allowing them to see the truth of their own emotions without interference. You are not forcing them to acknowledge your worth. You are allowing them to discover it on their own. And that kind of realization is far more potent than anything words could ever convince them of. Think about it. The human mind has a strange way of amplifying what it cannot have. When something is readily available, we assume it will always be there. But the moment it becomes scarce, the moment we feel its absence, it takes on a new level of importance. This is why distance has the power to awaken dormant emotions, to reignite appreciation, to bring clarity where there was once confusion. It is why so many people only recognize the value of a relationship once it is at risk of being lost. But here's where the real lesson lies. Your worth should never be dependent on someone else's recognition of it. Yes, space can make someone realize what they had, but your decision to give that space should never come from a place of strategy or manipulation. It should come from a place of self-respect, from an understanding that love is not about proving your importance to someone, but about allowing them the freedom to see it for themselves. And if they do not, if they walk away without looking back, then that is your answer. Then you know their presence in your life was never meant to be permanent. It takes immense strength to resist the urge to reach out, to explain yourself, to seek closure where there may be none. But in that strength, you reclaim your power. You remind yourself that love is not meant to be one-sided, that relationships should not be built on the foundation of one person constantly proving their worth. And if someone cannot see what you bring to their life unless you disappear from it, then maybe they were never truly present in the first place. There is a saying that if you let something go and it comes back, it was always meant to be yours. But here's the truth. What is meant for you will never require you to lose yourself to keep it. So if someone is ignoring you, let them. Let them experience what life feels like without you in it. And while they do, focus on yourself. Redirect that energy toward your own growth, your own happiness, your own journey. Because at the end of the day, the love that is truly meant for you will not come from someone who needs to lose you to see your worth. It will come from someone who recognizes it from the start. And when you stand in that understanding, when you hold on to that truth, you will never again feel the need to chase, to beg, to prove. You will simply know that your presence in someone's life is a privilege, not a given. And the right person, the person who truly values you, will never need distance to understand that. There is a moment in every journey of self-discovery when you stop seeking answers from others and start finding them within yourself. When someone who once held space in your life begins to ignore you, the temptation is to unravel, to dissect every conversation, every silence, every shift in energy, looking for an explanation. But what if the real answer isn't about them at all? What if the universe is guiding you toward something deeper, toward yourself? The most profound transformations often happen in the space where you feel most abandoned. That is where you learn who you truly are. That is where you stop measuring your worth by someone else's recognition and start seeing yourself as whole, independent of external validation. It is a shift that feels like breaking apart, but in reality, it is a breaking open. A liberation from the need to be chosen by someone who was never meant to define you. Silence has a way of teaching you lessons that words never could. When someone withdraws, it forces you to sit with yourself, to listen to the voice within that has been drowned out by the noise of seeking approval. You begin to realize that your value was never contingent on their presence, that the love you have to offer does not diminish just because someone else fails to see it. And in that realization, you find your power. Because the truth is, the moment you stop chasing, you start attracting what is truly meant for you. Let's think about this for a moment. Every relationship, every connection is an exchange of energy. And when you are constantly giving your time, your emotions, your love, without receiving the same in return, you begin to deplete yourself. When someone starts ignoring you, it is not just a reflection of their choices. It is an invitation for you to reclaim your own energy, to redirect that love inward, to recognize that the attention you crave from another is actually a reflection of the attention you need to give yourself. This is why the most powerful response to being ignored is not to demand an explanation, not to prove your worth, not to fight for someone's presence, but to become so deeply immersed in your own journey that their absence becomes irrelevant. When you step into your own power, when you cultivate your own joy, you shift the dynamic entirely. You are no longer waiting for their acknowledgement because you have already given yourself the recognition you were searching for. And here's the irony. When you stop seeking, they often return. Not because they suddenly had a change of heart, but because they feel the shift in your energy. People are drawn to those who are secure in themselves, to those who do not need validation, but radiate confidence from within. When you no longer need someone's presence to feel complete, you become magnetic. And in that moment, the power dynamic changes. Because now it is not about whether they choose you, it is about whether you still choose them. But the real question is, should you? Should you allow someone back into your life who only realized your worth once you stopped proving it? Should you give space to a person who needed to lose you to appreciate you? Or should you recognize that their absence was the universe's way of making room for something greater? The answer is not about revenge, nor is it about playing games. It is about alignment, about understanding that true connections do not require distance to be valued. That the people meant for you will see your worth in your presence, not just in your absence. And that your energy is far too precious to be spent on those who only notice it when it is gone. So if someone is ignoring you, take it as a sign that you were never meant to shrink yourself to fit into their world, a sign that your time, your love, your energy deserve to be received with the same depth that you offer them. And most importantly, a sign that it is time to stop waiting for them to return and start embracing the future that is waiting for you. Because at the end of the day, your worth is not defined by who chooses to acknowledge it. Your power lies in knowing that, with or without them, you are already enough.